which we are controlled, and with practically no information about how to know if you're being controlled, or who's doing it, or why they're doing it, or why anybody should bother. Very strange fact. Because the techniques, if you imagine that back in the 1950s they were first starting on mind control, MK Ultra, etc., they've had 50 years to practice, and so whatever techniques are used on the population, they must be pretty sophisticated. And I think that partially explains why it's so difficult to get publicity for things like this out there, because you get all sorts of faithful agreements from producers and people in the media, television, radio, etc., to say, yes, definitely it will be along with cameras and this kind of thing, and nothing happens. It all gets sort of folded away and doesn't happen, and that happens very, very frequently at the moment, which is rather interesting. However, that's not quite my theme. My theme is based as follows. The first idea is this: what is the nature of humanity? What are we? And that's a very difficult question, because obviously we don't know exactly where we came from. There are myths and all sorts of things. We're intelligent, we're aware of the world. We don't know that other animals are aware of the world. And we don't know where we came from. The Hopi Indians say we came from Mars. And we may have come from Mars. We may in fact have originated here and evolved. We may have been in the sea for millions of years. We may in fact have been totally aquatic for millions of years. We don't know. Isn't that a bit odd? Clearly we're not the kind of things we are told we are. We are told that we are a product of Darwinian evolution, and that therefore we're a kind of super ape or some kind of fantastic lemur or something. But in fact we can't be that, because obviously if you imagine all the things we do things that no animal would dream of doing. I mean, apart from the nasty things we do, there are all the constructive things we do which have no particular purpose in the animal kingdom. Why do we manufacture a tremendous wide range of things which we then completely lose interest in? And why do we then go on to manufacture a whole lot more things which we then lose interest in again? So evidently we're not running a show. Something else is saying, here are nice little useful androids, build all this stuff, we need it. So in other words, we are definitely in a system that doesn't make sense unless there's some kind of alien force, higher force operating to actually make us do the things we do and operate the way we do. In other words, we are not what we are told we are by textbooks, school, media, Darwinians, etc. We're nothing like that at all. And quite possibly, we are in fact symbiotic beings with something else. That means we are, each one of us, plural. We are a thing and a thing, and we don't understand what the other thing is, and it's unimaginable. But we're a thing with a thing. We're kind of a meeting, rather like something like that. And the reason I say that is because when I was very young indeed, I had a whole series of dreams when we lived in Shropshire about meeting some very strange sort of female things, female faces that were very wide and which were everywhere else. They were kind of inside out people. And I had the whole series of dreams about meeting the inside out people, and they were sort of very, very strange. They seemed to come in from all the angles, fold into where I was, and then fold out again and go away. It was impossible to explain, even to imagine. And so that was the beginning of my idea that we are in fact bipartite beings, but the other half of the relationship we can't even comprehend. So we are very complicated and unusual beings. We're not just biological machines. And I think that's a very important point. The second thing to say is that we are not alone. We are in a world with other beings, some of which are familiar to us, some of which are completely strange to us, and some of which are unimaginable, some of which we would say were spirits, and some of which we would say were aliens. And these other beings occasionally visit for their own reasons and for their own benefit presumably. And we have here therefore the various UFO events with humanoids that people encounter. Now hold that up, because there is a picture of, let us say, a classic 50s UFO report with aliens, in this case met by the Sisters Mitchell, which may or may not be true, but it represents the idea that there are similar beings to ourselves of a more evolved kind that we can think of as space brothers, who do occasionally come live amongst us and try to put us on the right track. I should imagine at the moment they're pretty dispirited given the way things are going. So in fact we have therefore the R point I'm thinking of, the different types of other being with us. Evidence is important here, and there is some evidence. That was in September, in Nature of September 1986. It appeared on one of the pages of Nature. It actually is a very small object. It's about 10 microns across, and it appeared in the amniotic fluid of a lady who was being examined at the Churchill Hospital. Now the amazing thing about this object, you can imagine a chromosome here and a chromosome here, and a sort of, it didn't have sharp, it had a sort of worn edges. I've just made a kind of a neater version of it. That diagram appeared in the lady's amniotic fluid on an absolutely microscopic piece of material. So small, it was about 1/10 of the size of anything manufactured at the time. And this appeared in Nature. Somebody wrote up and said, can anybody explain this? And evidently there are various forces here which are working together. One is the outside alien thing that I was trying to talk about at the beginning. The second force are these beings that send very tiny things all over the world and seem to be putting them in people, like implants or tiny little manufactured artificial objects. We don't know why they do it. We don't know what it's for, but they probably affect us, and we hope it's for good. But certainly, if you imagine that if you had within you, in a very tiny, in a sort of a microscopic scale, a very little barcode made by an alien, what difference would it make? What kind of science could be attached to it? What difference would it make to your life? Why should they do it? And what's it all about? Because that is a very interesting bit of evidence that nobody quite wants to square up to. If you have within you something completely outside the human culture, what effect does that have on you and your life? And they do exist. The third point is that we have positive forces and negative forces. Now, for example, there are very negative forces that want us to forget all about this scenario of having a wider and a better world and other friends and positive spiritual forces, miracles if you like. There are forces that want us just to think about money. They don't want us to do anything else but collect money, be happy with money, have mortgages, get tied up in the cash system and not think about anything else. They are very strong at the moment, and in fact their main aim is to fiscalise the system, to narrow the system, to make us materialistic, to tell us all the things necessary so that we will in fact go out and be good little consumers, that we will in fact be quite happy with that limited role, that each person will consider this absolutely ludicrous fact that they stop about here and that this doesn't concern them, that they are localised. How ludicrous that is should be experienced by any family when you find, for example, that you're just thinking about an aunt and they ring up, and you're just thinking about your son and something else happens that clearly indicates that what was happening to you relates to what was happening to them, because they ring up or you ring them and something's just happened and you both saw it. So whatever it is trying to sort of focus us down into something even more useful than we already are. They want to localise us, they want to finitise us, they want to fiscalise us, they want to mislead us They do not want to tell us the truth. The truth is precious for the elite, for the inner fraternity. It's for the people who, the cognoscenti, they don't want us to have the truth about our own origins, our own worth, our own value, our own abilities. And this is absolutely pandemic at the moment. For example, most people do not know how good their senses are, which is the beginning, you would think, of being a person, is to know how good your senses are. There was an article in Nature in Science in September 1991 that said that we can actually hear up to 120,000 cycles per second. 120,000 cycles per second by bone conduction, not by air. We can actually hear frequencies that high. A normal person can hear up to 120,000 cycles per second. That's almost the long wave radio frequencies, which start at about 140,000 cycles per second. So we can hear those frequencies by bone conduction. We can hear ultrasound. We can detect magnetic fields. As the first speaker said, we can see more than a photograph records. We can in fact be aware of auras. We have electrical senses. We have hairs on our arms that respond when there are electrical fields present. We have tons of senses. We even have a third sense of smell, which I can never convince anybody of, but we do have at least 3 senses of smell. We have a sense of smell very similar to that which cats have in the wild. So we have all these things, and yet we are reduced, boxed down, reduced to being consumer units that go in on Saturday and spend a little bit of money in town and think that that's what it's all about. It's absolutely terrible that we are all forking out a fortune for education for our kids, which doesn't work apparently, and which results in this incredibly impoverished view of what people are all about. I'm not trying to be religious here, I'm just trying to say, what is the point of giving people such an incredibly narrow view just so they behave predictably? Why the heck should anybody want to control us so much that we think of Saturday as a day you pop in to do a little bit of shopping and go home again, and then you watch all the favourite soaps, and then you go out and do the usual things on Sunday and come back again. At each point they know where you are and what you're doing. And if you notice, the next step in this progress has to do with the gypsies. They want to make being a gypsy as hard as they possibly can so they know where absolutely everybody is. It's almost as bad as the Stasi were in East Germany, where every single phone socket had a microphone, and that is a true fact. Every single phone socket in Eastern Germany before the fall of the wall had a hidden microphone. And they want why do they have this desperation to know exactly where we are and what we're doing at all times? It's almost demonic, and some people are very worried about it. The next word I'm thinking of is alone. Okay? Now, a human being cannot be alone. If I'm right in saying that we are bipartite creatures with more than one nature in a symbiotic relationship, then it's impossible to imagine that we can be alone, because we'd stop being aware of the world. And that seems very fanciful to some extent, except